Hello and welcome to Quarterlight, your car brochure channel, and in today's episode, the Mazda 818. Hello and welcome back. Quarterlight, we're a car brochure channel here on YouTube looking at car brochures from around the world for the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s and sometimes beyond that as well. So if you're interested in cars, car brochures, looking back at cars gone by, then please do subscribe. It is all completely free. Anyway, over the last few weeks we've been looking at 1970s Mazdas. Interesting cars, a little bit of forgotten cars in many ways in the UK. I don't think they were huge sellers. Well, here's another. The Mazda 818. I think that was known as Mazda 808 in some markets, but in the UK, the 818. You're kind of like thinking, you know, as the numbers are getting bigger, the cars are getting bigger, but notice the engine size. Anyway, we'll throw that on the board and have a look at that now. So here is today's brochure, the Mazda 818. We started this little bit of a series with Mazdas, look at the Mazda 1000 and 1300s. Then we moved on to the pickups, the Mazda B1600 pickup. These are all like mid-70s Mazdas. And then last week we looked at the Mazda 616. And you think you're going to get bigger and bigger because now we're up to the Mazda 818, but 1272cc engine, but we do have it now in a saloon, a coupe and an estate. Now the date of this brochure is March 1976, and you can see this is a UK brochure by the Mazda Car Imports GB Limited. Now actually I've got another one of these brochures, identical, no change whatsoever, although the only problem with black, you always get some reflections, all the fingerprint. I'm never a huge fan of black brochures, but anyway, you can see it looks identical, but actually if we turn to the back of this brochure, this one's the same year, but October 1976, and you'd think, well, I'm going to say now, all the pictures in here are exactly the same, apart from one I think I've noticed. I think everything else is the same, but we'll show you the little bit of an update that came in that brochure. Anyway, let's continue with a March 1976 brochure. Let's open her up. And we're greeting with some really nice images for what would have been a relatively small importer in the UK in the 70s. There's a lot of information. The quality of the picture is really nice. A little bit faint in the images, but they are quality images, so I would assume all these images have been done elsewhere and possibly not just for the UK market because it looks a little bit too high quality. We'll start with the text though. We'll look at all those pictures and we'll see if there's anything different in the later brochure. It tells us, introducing the Mazda 818, 3 economical 1300s that combine reliability and comfort in a medium-sized family car. And like the other Mazdas that we've looked at, I think in some markets that you could have got a rotary engine. Mazda was really big into rotaries at this time, and I think earlier in this they even came with like a rotary type design badge. I don't know. I'm in two minds about rotaries. I don't think there were ever how can I put this? I like them in that the drivability is quite exciting, very high revving engines, but at the same time I always think they're doomed to failure. But some of these manufacturers insisted on continuing with them for whatever reason. I know there's lots of rotary fans and I understand why, but I don't think I would ever buy a brand new rotary engine car. I don't think. Maybe I'm too sensible. I don't know. Anyway, let's continue. There's a spacious 4-door saloon and a practical 5-door estate and a sporty 2-door coupe. All are lavishly equipped with the sort of specification that many more expensive cars can't match. Again, the UK market, we have to get in there somehow. What do? We make super reliable cars and add extra bits of equipment. Is a plan that ultimately worked. So it says cloth upholstery reclining front seats, tinted windows, heated rear window, reversing lights and a laminated windscreen are just a few of the 818's many standard features. Doesn't sound much today, but back then that would have been hard to find on some of the Fords and Vauxhalls of the time for probably the same sort of price. Moving down, just as you'd expect from one of Japan's most advanced car makers, the Mazda 818's are technically attractive too. Whichever 818 model you choose, you get a 1272cc 4-cylinder overhead camshaft engine with a 5-bearing crankshaft and an aluminium cylinder head. It's an efficient engineering formula that ensures economical performance, as Autocar magazine found when they road tested a 1975 model 818. They said, a gentle owner would not be over optimistic in expecting 40 miles per gallon. Obviously, we've changed our 1976 model for the better. In addition to its small appetite for fuel, the 818 range has inexpensive tastes and runs happily on 2-star petrol. If I zoom in at one of the saloon car models, I wouldn't say these are the most exciting designed vehicles at this period in the, sort of like the Japanese imports, but still, I still quite like them. Very unusually shaped chrome bumper on the front end, I find. And then if we look at the interior, pleasant, and at least we get a little bit of cloth in there so it doesn't burn yourself in the heat. Your typical don't adjust your sets, it's supposed to be blurry. This is a car at speed image. I don't know why they do that. The rear end of what looks like the coupe version, that looks a little bit fancy. Look at those rear lights, they're not just flat lights, they've got a certain little bit of a classy look about them. They're very unusual, and we'll come back to this picture in a moment. We've got this saloon in what looks like quite an attractive looking colour actually, and look at the colour of the wheels on there. They've been painted in sort of like a light blue colour, and I think I quite like that. I don't usually like strange colours on wheels, but actually that looks quite nice and suits it with that blue colour. And then we get this much more practical estate. I think I preferred the estate actually. I quite like the overall look of the estate. Again, I don't think the wheels are just a very traditional grey colour. They look a little bit different. I wonder if the wheels actually were a different colour depending on what colour you picked. And then probably the most attractive of the three, the coupe version. It's hard to tell the wheels. Obviously they're a different colour wheel to that blue one, but unusual that they've painted the wheels. Bit of a beauty ring around there as well. They've made the most of what is just a steel wheel, I think. Trying to work out what it says on the badge there. It looks like it says Deluxe. Now I said I'll come back to this rear image, and the reason for that is going to come clear now. I've thrown this later 76 brochure up next to it. All the images are the same. Possibly this seat is a little bit different. We can see that's a bit of a different seat. So we'll look at that. We got this different picture here, and then we got this different picture. So let's just have a zoom in at some of the changes. So I think it's the same seat design but in a different colour shown on this later brochure, which is always nice to see a different option. But moving down, instead of that terrible shot at speed, we've got a more sedate speed, but there is some differences on this later one, namely those rear lights. Looks like they changed it later on for more of that reversing light being moved to more of the central position. Just remind you of the earlier one. We can see that difference on there. So one thing I do like about this brochure actually is if this was Ford or even Vauxhall of this time period, they wouldn't have bothered doing a separate photograph for this. They would have just edited it, but obviously this is a different pictures used in the brochure to update it, which to me seems like the most sensible way to do it. But Vauxhalls and Fords, they used to like editing pictures rather than retaking pictures, so well done Mazda. And then I've turned the page. All the text is identical in both brochures, incidentally, if you was wondering, but we'll read the text on this page, then we'll come back to these wonderful images. So it tells us here the very full inside story. For comfort, the 818s have reclining seats with built-in headrests up front and smart cloth upholstery all round. There's also plenty of room for 5 to stretch out. Each door is armed with an armrest, wall-to-wall carpeting runs underfoot, and tinted glass provides a relaxing view. For a change of atmosphere, there's a flow-through heating and ventilation system with a 3-speed blower, and even the coupe has wind-down rear windows. Ooh, fancy. For safety, there's a rigid passenger compartment with crumple zones front and rear, a laminated windscreen and hazard warning flashes. For secure handling, the 818s have front disc brakes and light, precise steering that gives a turning circle of under 30 feet. The slick, all-synchromesh gearbox has a well-chosen ratios for a pleasant change. The saloon offers the option of an automatic transmission. And tuned suspension with front anti-roll bar combines sure road holding with a comfortable ride. For convenience, each model has a very fully equipped dashboard with variable instrument lighting and a range of instruments and warning lights that includes an ammeter and a water temperature gauge. Most of the electrical functions are controlled by 2 steering column stalks, so your hands need rarely leave the steering wheel. One operates the headlight flasher and main beam, plus the indicator, 2-speed wipers and twin jet washers. The other stalk covers the parking and headlights. For smokers, there's a cigarette lighter plus ashtray front and rear. Very much the time of the 70s, isn't it, to talk about smokers and really catering to the smokers. And for security, we fitted locks to the fuel filler cap and steering column. If you opt for the 818 Coupe, you'll get a car that's even more attractive both inside and out. Underneath its gently sloping roof lies a GT car interior with the added advantage of a rev counter and electric clock as standard equipment. Interior shot, and of course this must be the saloon because it's showing the automatic, or it doesn't tell us what any of these real pictures are really referring to. Sort of a light grey colour, not the most exciting interior, but it is what it is, I guess. Moving down, we get a second look at the seats, which I do approve of. I think they're quite nice. We get a second blurry speed shot. A bit of a look at the front end of the coupe. The coupe again, unfortunately falling on the crease. I think red was probably the colour to go for that one. And then the final image, oh no, there's one more, isn't there? I'm going to say the final image is this grey example of the saloon, but there actually is one more picture. This must be the coupe, and actually I do prefer this interior even though it's very similar. I'm assuming one of them little pods will be a rev counter then. Hard to see on the picture for the saloon, of course, but there's quite a slope on that dashboard. Maybe it's actually more interesting than what we first believe. I've just overlaid the later brochure here on top here. You can see most of the images are actually completely identical. We get this slightly different coloured trim seat, which we'll have a peek at, I think. These images are all the same. And then looking at the other side, like I say, the later brochure is on top. Similar images, we've got a slightly different angle for the coupe, which we'll have a look at, and then we've got a different colour for this saloon, which I think looks a little bit nicer in the later brochure. So there is that different coloured interior. The same coupe but a different angle, and I think someone said we can do a better shot of that. Let's do this again. So I think that looks a lot nicer from that particular angle. Probably its best angle someone discovered later on. And then they found a much nicer colour to do that saloon in as well. I think it really suits that colour, and I'm not sure I like the grey, but in this colour I think it looks quite nice with all the chrome actually. So then we turn the page and we get images of the estate or wagon version of the 818. There'd be no need to look at the later brochure because all these images and text are exactly the same on each brochure, which I guess is a reminder that manufacturers were always a little bit lazier on their estates and wagons, really. So obviously they didn't change the lights on the wagon version. We'll start with the text. We'll probably glance over some script here by the looks of it. Someone looks like they were pricing one up, which is always interesting. Then we'll come back to the images. So obviously they was talking about both the saloon and the estate, how much they were. It looks like the on-the-road price for the saloon was £2,058, £2,099 with the metallic paint. Nice. And then the estate was £2,208 and £2,249 with the metallic paint. So that would have been the on-the-road prices straight from the pen of the dealer there. So that's always interesting to have a look at. Wonder if maybe one of these was actually picked and actually bought at the time. Always like this. I know this probably actually devalues the brochure having this scroll in the middle, but I always prefer that sort of like at the time, sort of like someone scrolling the prices on there. Takes you right back to that era, I think. Anyway, moving to the text of the brochure. It tells you the 818 estate for people who carry loads. If your carrying needs are greater than your spacious boot of our saloon, the 5-door estate is the 818 for you. Along with all the performance and equipment of our saloon, it gives more room to get away with things. On the load floor that stretches to over 3 feet when the back seat up and just over 5 feet with it down, the rear compartment has the advantage of a neat rubber mat and chrome lashing rails on each side of the window. Plus a deep, wide tailgate that swings up out of the way to provide a loading height that lies low above the ground. We then get a tiny image of the estate with that tailgate up. To find out exactly what we're talking about, call in at your local Mazda dealer. He'll be pleased to show you around an 818 and arrange a no obligation test drive. And then it starts talking about Mazdas in general, so just read this section, then we'll go back to the actual images of the estate themselves. So Mazdas are really built to last. At most car factories, testing is a routine matter. At Mazda, it's an obsession. From the moment it starts life as a prototype to the moment it's dispatched to you, your Mazda is subjected to almost endless series of rigorous, painstaking checks. It starts in our design and development unit, where we use advanced equipment like a computerized structural analysis system to help us evaluate new body and chassis designs for safety and durability. Later developments reached the Mazda test track for a punishing sequence of torture tests. Under strict test conditions, we roll them, smash them into brick walls and drive them through clouds of dust. We give the suspension a rough time, race the engine and skid and slide them. And then we evaluate them to ensure that each new Mazda model will take the toughest treatment that you could give it for mile after mile. We ensure that every single Mazda is tested in production too. There are some 700 inspection stations throughout the factory. Some test incoming materials and components, others are on the final assembly line where over 2,000 checks are carried out on the suspension, steering, fuel lines, gears and instruments, even the cigarette lighter. That's why we say Mazdas are built to last. So overall some interesting little images there, but let's get back to that estate. So another Mazda at speed, this time the estate. And coming back at you as well. But much more interesting, I think, these sort of station wagon estate images from the rear. These still images I always much prefer. Interesting design actually for the estate. I think I out of all of them, I find these the most interesting. Reversing lights in the bumpers there. Quite nice looking tail lights. Little Mazda written across the chrome there, and you can just about make out the all-important Deluxe badge. We also get a front image of the estate and then a couple of sort of your typical brochure showing what it's like with the tailgate open. Apologies for the reflections, it is quite a shiny brochure. You can see it's not a split seat though, it kind of like just all tips over together. So that takes us to the back page of this brochure, and for anyone who's interested, if I just compare the back page to the new and the old one, looks like the only difference is it's showing this rear shot, how they've changed the lights there on that coupe. But anyway, let's have a look at the specifications for the brochure we're looking at. There's also a dealer stamp which we'll look at the end as well. Started talking about the saloon and the dimensions, and it goes down to the engine there. Sorry for wiggling the camera around as I moved it down. So it's a water-cooled 4-cylinder inline 08C, 1272cc. Quite a small engine that, isn't it? Particularly when you look at that estate. Although I don't think they're huge cars, but I'm surprised. You know, when you think about 818, someone said, "Oh, we'd like an 818." You'd imagine a huge thing with a huge engine, wouldn't you? Maybe that's just me. Anyway, moving down to the transmission. I'm not going to read it all, but certainly you can pause this screen at any time. So moving down to the transmission. So it's a 4-speed all synchromesh gearbox. Talks about the gear ratio. It's a floor change. Steering is recirculating ball and nut. Suspension front, strut tight with coil springs. Rear, semi-elliptic leaf springs. Shock absorbers front, double acting hydraulic shock absorbers rear. Gas filled, double acting hydraulic axle. Rear, semi-floating. Brakes, discs at the front, drums at the rear. And then the coupe, same specifications as the saloon, they're sharing the same engine. Showing some differences there of overall height and curb weight, which is obvious. And then the estate, again, it's going to be the same specification, it's just different size, of course. And then it moves on to the automatic saloon, just an automatic only available on the saloon, as we found out. The transmission on the auto is 3 forward speeds and a reverse. Gear shift method is 6 position, and that's a floor change as well. So that then takes us to the standard equipment. Speedometer, trip meter, fuel gauge, temperature gauge, ammeter, panel light rheostat, glove box, heater, 3-speed fan, through floor ventilation, cigarette lighter, interior ventilation, ashtray front and rear, tinted windows, door mounted rear view mirror, 5-function lever switch for the wipers, washers, indicators, main beam, dip, headlight flasher, carpets, cloth upholstery, reclining front. Seats, fore and after seat adjustment, front seat headrests, twin sun visors, armrests on all doors, 2-speed wipers, twin jet washers, hazard warning flashes, reversing lights, locking petrol cap, radial ply tyres, overhead cam engine, front disc brakes, chrome ring wheel trims, front suspension, struts with coil springs, double acting shock absorbers, anti-roll bar, heated rear window, laminated windscreen, bonded window, moulding front and rear, toolkit and touch-up paint. And then the coupe version adds a rev counter and electric clock. We get, as we saw at the start of the programme, the Mazda Car Imports address in Tunbridge Wells, Kent. And then finally we get the Mazda dealer of the day, Regal Motors, Leeds, Low Road, Hunslet, Leeds, even has a telephone number there as well. And just a quick reminder that this particular brochure that we've been concentrating on today is March 1976. Let's just cast our camera over those final images, although I think they are repeats of the saloon, estate and your coupe. Which one would have you picked if you had the choice? Certainly the coupe is the most attractive of the three. And then finally a look at the engine, which all those models are indeed sharing, a 1272cc unit. So there we go, the Mazda 818 today for this particular UK brochure that came from a Leeds dealership. Do you remember these cars? Did you own one? Any memories of them at all? Please jot in the comments. I think they're interesting cars, 70s Japanese cars, as I've found quite a few people think they're interesting as well. But thank you so much for watching today. We'll end by saying, please do consider subscribing. It is all completely free. Helps you find the episodes you want to see, helps the channel grow and give you better content, as well as just watching this video, liking this video, telling all your friends about Quarterlight. Much appreciated. Absolutely. We're going to add a few boxes here. One will be for the other Mazdas set in the 70s that we've been looking at, and I might just put another box on there for some other Japanese car in the 70s, maybe what we've been looking at recently. Oh yes, of course, I can always add a few Mitsubishis on there as well. But thank you for watching today. Please do take care. We'll see you very soon, and goodbye.